A millionaire bored with his life of luxury decided to wander the streets disguised to test people's kindness. When finding a humble lady who offered him simple help, he discovered a secret that would make him rethink about his past. Hello, welcome, enjoy, subscribe and activate notifications. The city of Monterey stretched beneath the expansive sky, its twinkling lights a reflection of both its wealth and its struggles. Towering skyscrapers stood as monuments to success, while in their shadows, narrow streets buzzed with life. Vendors hawking wares, children playing barefoot, and beggars seeking a few pesos. It was a city of contrasts, where luxury cars idled, next to creaking pushcarts, and laughter mingled with quiet desperation. Santiago Romero gazed out from the balcony of his penthouse, sipping a glass of aged scotch. The view, breathtaking to anyone else, had long ceased to impress him. His life was one of opulence, designer suits, private jets, and parties with people as wealthy as him. Yet for all his possessions, a gnawing emptiness had taken root within him, growing stronger with each passing day. That night, sleep eluded him. He paced the polished marble floors of his apartment, his mind restless. "What's the point of it all?" he muttered, his voice echoing in the cavernous silence. The scotch had no answers, and neither did the framed accolades lining his walls. On a whim, he tossed on a faded jacket and baseball cap, an ensemble he hadn't worn in years, and headed to his private elevator. Minutes later, Santiago stepped into the cool night air, the streets alive with energy foreign to his insulated world. Disguised, he wandered aimlessly, drawn to the neighborhoods he'd only ever seen through tinted car windows. The further he walked, the more the city's pulse changed. Neon signs gave way to dim streetlights, and the polished sidewalks turned to uneven cobblestone. Vendors called out, their voices hoarse from the day's work. A boy no older than 7 offered him a pack of gum, his eyes wide and hopeful. Santiago hesitated but bought 2, handing over a bill without waiting for change. The boy's grateful smile stirred something unfamiliar in him. It was then Santiago had an idea. What if he tested people's kindness, not with money or status, but as an ordinary man? What would they see in him? Would they help or would they turn away? Spotting a patch of uneven pavement, he feigned a stumble, clutching his knee as though in pain. He waited, observing passers-by. Some glanced at him, but quickly averted their eyes, while others hurried past without so much as a glance. The experiment seemed destined to fail until an older woman carrying a basket of homemade candies stopped in her tracks. "Are you hurt, mijo?" the woman asked, her voice soft but tinged with concern. Santiago looked up, meeting her gaze. Her face was weathered, each wrinkle a testament to a life lived with hardship and dignity. She set down her basket, kneeling beside him. I think I twisted my ankle," Santiago replied, trying to sound convincing. The woman nodded, her hands surprisingly steady as she examined his leg. "It doesn't look broken, thank God. But you shouldn't sit here like this. Come, my house is nearby. We can at least get you off the street." Santiago was taken aback by her sincerity. "Oh no, I couldn't." "Hush now," she interrupted, her tone firm but kind. "You'll get your death out here, let's go." As she helped him to his feet, Santiago noticed the weight of her basket. "You don't have to carry that and help me," he said, guilt creeping into his voice. "Don't worry about me," she replied with a smile. "I'm stronger than I look." The woman introduced herself as Doña Rosa as they walked to a modest home tucked away in an alley. The small house was a patchwork of repairs with peeling paint and mismatched furniture. Yet it exuded warmth, with the smell of fresh tortillas wafting from the kitchen. "Camila!" Rosa called out. "Come help me, niña." A young woman emerged, her dark eyes sharp and skeptical. Camila was in her early 20s, her posture confident yet guarded. She eyed Santiago suspiciously, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Who's this?" "Just a poor man who needed help," Rosa explained, brushing off the question. "Fetch the first aid kit, will you?" Camilla hesitated, but obeyed, her gaze never leaving Santiago. When she returned, she handed the kit to her grandmother, without a word, then crossed her arms. "We don't even know him, Abuela." "Kindness doesn't need permission, Camila," Rosa chided gently. Santiago watched the exchange with interest, noticing the tension between them. Rosa worked quickly, bandaging his ankle with practiced hands. "There, that should do for now. You'll need to rest it for a day or two." "Thank you," Santiago said, his voice genuine. "I don't know how to repay you." Rosa waved a hand dismissively. "Repayment isn't necessary. Just promise me you'll be careful, mijo." Camila snorted. "Promises are cheap." "Camila!" Rosa scolded, her tone sharp for the first time. "It's okay," Santiago interjected, raising a hand. He turned to Camila, offering a small smile. "I understand your caution. The world isn't always kind." Camila narrowed her eyes, clearly unconvinced. "You can stay here for the night," she said begrudgingly, "but only because Abuela insists." "Thank you," Santiago replied, grateful but intrigued by her mistrust. As Rosa busied herself in the kitchen, Santiago leaned back, observing the modest home. A worn photo frame on the shelf caught his eye. A younger Rosa with a man and a little girl, all smiling. The simplicity of their joy struck a chord in him. "Why did you help me?" he asked Rosa later, as they shared a humble meal. "Because, mijo," she said with a wistful smile, "the world has too much coldness. If I can offer a little warmth, why wouldn't I?" Santiago felt a lump in his throat, her words stirring something deep within him. For the first time in years, he wondered if he was the one being tested, not the other way around. The night stretched long, but Santiago found himself unable to sleep on the worn cot Rosa had set up for him. The modest room, with its creaking walls and faint scent of lavender, felt more real than any luxury suite he'd ever stayed in. As he stared at the cracked ceiling, memories of his childhood surfaced, unbidden and vivid. He was a boy again, sitting at the edge of his father's office. The room had been cavernous, with shelves lined with books that no one read, and a heavy oak desk behind which his father always sat. "Money, Santiago," his father had said, his voice cold and deliberate, "is the only thing that matters. People are tools. Use them before they use you." He had been only 9 at the time, but those words etched themselves deep into his mind. His mother, no softer in her demeanor, would chide him for showing weakness. "Feelings are for the poor," she would say, "and we are not poor." Santiago sighed, running a hand through his hair. For decades he had lived by those teachings, climbing to the top of industries and surrounding himself with wealth. Yet, in Rosa's humble home, with its chipped paint and patched curtains, he saw a richness that eluded his grand estates. The next morning, the aroma of coffee and freshly made tortillas drew him to the small kitchen. Rosa stood by the stove, her hands moving deftly as she hummed a soft tune. Camilla was seated at the table, her eyes sharp and watchful as she sipped her coffee. "Good morning," Santiago greeted cautiously. Camilla barely acknowledged him, but Rosa turned with a warm smile. "Good morning, mijo. Did you sleep well?" "As well as I could," he replied, sitting down. He hesitated before asking, "Do you always wake up this early?" Rosa laughed, her voice light. "When you've lived as long as I have, you learn to make the most of every hour. Besides, there's work to be done. These candies don't sell themselves." "Why do you do it, though?" Santiago asked. "You could rest more." Rosa's smile faltered, and for the first time, he saw a glimmer of pain in her eyes. "Because life doesn't wait for you to rest," she said softly. "I've been working since I was a girl, helping my family survive. And when my daughter passed, well, Camilla needed me." Camilla stiffened at the mention of her mother, her knuckles tightening around her mug. "Abuela, you don't have to explain anything to him." "Camila," Rosa said gently, "it's okay. No, it's not, Camilla snapped, turning to Santiago. You show up out of nowhere, and we're just supposed to trust you. Who are you, really? Santiago met her glare but didn't flinch. I'm just a man trying to understand the world, he said evenly. I've had everything handed to me, but I'm starting to wonder if I've ever truly lived. Camilla scoffed, pushing back her chair. You don't know anything about living. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, leaving the door ajar. Rosa sighed, sitting down across from Santiago. Don't take it personally. Camilla has been through more than you can imagine. Santiago leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. What happened to her mother? Rosa's gaze grew distant, her hands clasping tightly together. My daughter, Sophia, was bright and full of dreams. She fell in love with a man who made promises he couldn't keep. When he left, she tried to raise Camilla on her own, but life was cruel to her. She passed away when Camilla was just 8. I'm sorry, Santiago said quietly. Rosa nodded, her smile faint but resolute. Thank you. But Camilla is strong, just like her mother. She's had to be. Over the next few days, Santiago found himself lingering in Rosa's home, drawn to its simple rhythms. He helped her carry the heavy basket of candies to the market and fix a broken hinge on the kitchen door. Though Camilla remained distant, Rosa's warmth made him feel strangely at ease. One afternoon, Santiago and Rosa sat on the porch, the sun casting long shadows across the narrow alley. Rosa was sewing a tear in Camilla's jacket, while Santiago polished an old stool he had found in the corner of the house. Doña Rosa, he began hesitantly, you've mentioned hard times before. What happened? Rosa paused, her needle hovering midair. Years ago, my husband owned a small bakery. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Then one day we lost it. A big company bought the land we were renting and we were forced to leave. They didn't care about our livelihood, just their profit. Santiago felt his chest tighten. Do you know who the company was? Rosa shook her head. No, and it wouldn't change anything if I did. What's done is done, but it broke my husband. He couldn't recover, and it wasn't long before he passed. Her words hit Santiago like a blow. He had no concrete proof, but something told him his family's company, Romero Enterprises, had been involved. Their aggressive expansions had displaced countless small businesses over the years, all in the name of growth. Doña Rosa, he said softly, guilt gnawing at him. If you ever found out who was responsible, what would you do? Rosa looked at him, her eyes steady and kind. I would pray for them, mijo. No good comes from holding on to anger. Life has taught me that much. Santiago couldn't respond, her words cutting deeper than she could know. For the first time, he questioned not just his actions, but the legacy of the empire he had inherited. Santiago couldn't shake the weight of Rosa's story. Her words echoed in his mind as he walked through the bustling streets of the city. The smell of roasted corn and the chatter of vendors filled the air. But Santiago's focus was elsewhere. He had slipped back into his old habits, using his wealth and connections discreetly to dig into the past. Sitting in a dimly lit cafe, his laptop open before him, Santiago combed through records and archives. He searched for details about the acquisition of land for development projects his family's company had undertaken decades ago. His heart sank when he found what he had feared. Romero Enterprises had purchased the block where Rosa's husband's bakery once stood. The names of the displaced businesses were listed in cold, clinical rows. Among them was Panaderia El Milagro. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. His family's empire, his empire, had thrived on the backs of people like Rosa and her husband. Lives destroyed, dreams crushed, all for the sake of expanding their wealth. That evening, Santiago returned to Rosa's house with a heaviness he couldn't hide. Rosa noticed his troubled expression as she prepared dinner. You look like you've seen a ghost, mijo, she said gently, placing a bowl of steaming caldo in front of him. Santiago forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just thinking about some things. Rosa sat down across from him, her hands folded neatly. Sometimes it helps to share what's on your mind. He hesitated, unsure if he could bear to tell her the truth. Instead, he asked, "Doña Rosa, how did you manage to stay so kind after everything that happened?" She gave him a wistful smile. "Because I've seen what bitterness does to people. My husband, bless his soul, couldn't let go of the anger. It consumed him, and he was gone before his time. I didn't want to follow that path. So I chose to believe in the goodness of others, even when it's hard." Her words were a stark contrast to everything Santiago had been taught. He had been raised to see kindness as weakness, generosity as foolishness. Yet here was Rosa, embodying strength through compassion. A week later, Santiago was helping Rosa organize old boxes in the small storage room of her home. The room was cramped, filled with faded photographs, brittle letters, and keepsakes from another era. Rosa handed him a stack of papers and motioned for him to place them on a shelf. As he moved the stack, a photograph slipped out and fluttered to the ground. Santiago picked it up, intending to hand it back, but froze when he saw the image. It was a black and white photo of a younger Rosa standing in front of a bakery, smiling proudly. Beside her was a man Santiago assumed was her late husband, holding a sign that read, "Panaderia El Milagro." His stomach churned as he noticed a figure in the background of the photo. A man in a suit, holding a briefcase, stood near the edge of the frame. Santiago's heart dropped. It was his father. He stared at the image, his hands trembling. The man who had taught him that people were tools to be used had been directly involved in the destruction of Rosa's family. "Santiago?" Rosa's voice broke through his thoughts. "Is something wrong?" He quickly tucked the photo back into the stack and turned to her with a strained smile. "No, nothing. Just lost in thought." But he couldn't hide the truth for long. That night, as he sat on the porch, Camilla approached him, her arms crossed and her expression guarded. "You've been acting strange," she said bluntly. "What's going on?" Santiago hesitated, knowing this was his chance to come clean. But before he could speak, Camilla's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. "What's this?" she demanded, shoving the phone in his face. The screen displayed a news article with Santiago's picture. The headline read, "Santiago Romero spotted in disguise, Millionaire's curious experiment with the poor." Camilla's eyes burned with fury. "You're him! I knew there was something off about you." "Camilla, I can explain." Santiago began, but she cut him off. "Explain what? That you're some spoiled rich kid playing games with people's lives? Or that you've been lying to us this whole time?" Rosa emerged from the house, concern etched on her face. "What's going on?" "Ask him," Camilla snapped. "Ask him who he really is." Santiago looked at Rosa, guilt heavy in his chest. "Doña Rosa, I never meant to deceive you. I came here to learn, to understand a different side of life, but there's more. My family," he faltered, unable to continue. Rosa stepped closer, her gaze searching his face. "Whatever it is, just say it, mijo." Camilla scoffed, turning away. "He's not worth it, abuela. He's just like all the others." "Camilla, please," Rosa said firmly. "Let him speak." Santiago took a deep breath. "My family's company. It's responsible for what happened to your bakery. My father was the one who forced you and your husband out." The silence that followed was deafening. Rosa's face remained calm, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Camilla, however, exploded. "I knew it! You're a hypocrite, pretending to care, pretending to help, while your family destroyed everything we had." "Camilla, enough," Rosa said softly. "Enough? Abuela, how can you defend him?" "Because anger won't fix anything," Rosa replied, her voice steady. She turned to Santiago. You've made mistakes, mijo. We all have. The question is, what will you do? Now, Santiago had no answer. For the first time in his life, he was truly unsure of what to do. The porch was silent, except for the occasional creak of the wooden boards under Rosa's rocking chair. The tension between Santiago and Camila hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Rosa's calm presence was the only thing keeping it from erupting. I've spent my life hiding behind wealth, Santiago began, his voice low but steady. I thought money could solve anything, but all it did was make me blind to the damage my family caused. Coming here, meeting you both, it's the first time I've truly seen the consequences of what that wealth has done. Camila crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. And what? You expect us to forgive you just because you feel bad now? Feeling bad doesn't fix anything, Santiago. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, meeting her gaze. But I want to make things right, not just for you and Rosa, but for everyone like you who was hurt by my family's greed. Rosa's hand rested on her granddaughter's arm, a silent plea for patience. Words are easy, mijo, Rosa said softly. What matters is what you do next. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes, Santiago replied. I've already started reaching out to organizations that can help people rebuild their lives. I want to use my resources to undo as much harm as I can. Camila let out a sharp laugh. Undo harm? You can't bring back my grandfather. You can't erase the years we spent struggling because of your father's choices. No, I can't, Santiago admitted. But I can try to honor his memory by helping others like him. And if there's anything specific I can do for you and Rosa, I'll do it. The sincerity in his voice gave Rosa pause. She studied his face, her sharp eyes searching for any trace of deception. Finally, she spoke. You have a long road ahead of you, Santiago. Trust is not given freely. It's earned through action. Camila remained unconvinced. You want to prove yourself, then show us. Do something real, something that actually matters. Santiago nodded, a fire of determination igniting within him. I will. You'll see. True to his word, Santiago began his mission to make amends. He started by liquidating some of his family's least ethical ventures, funneling the proceeds into a trust fund dedicated to supporting small businesses and families displaced by corporate expansion. One afternoon, he arrived at Rosa and Camila's home with a thick folder of documents. These are the first steps, he said, placing it on the table. I've set up a fund in your husband's name, Rosa. It will provide grants for local businesses like his bakery. And I've also arranged for repairs to this house, only if you're comfortable with that. Rosa looked through the documents, her hands trembling slightly. This is more than I ever expected, she said, her voice breaking. Camila, still skeptical, flipped through the papers. It's a start, she muttered, her tone grudging, but Santiago didn't stop there. Over the weeks that followed, he became a fixture in their lives. He worked with community leaders to address housing issues and set up scholarship programs for underprivileged youth. Though his presence initially drew suspicion, his consistent efforts began to win people over. One evening, as the three of them shared a modest dinner, Camila broke the silence. I saw what you did for the Ramirez family, she said, her voice soft. They told me how you helped them reopen their shop. Santiago nodded. They deserved the chance to rebuild, just like you and Rosa do. Camila's eyes met his, and for the first time there was a glimmer of something other than anger, perhaps understanding. Maybe you're not just playing a role after all, she admitted reluctantly. Rosa smiled, her usual warmth returning. People can change, Camila. Sometimes it just takes the right moment to open their eyes. Santiago looked at Rosa, gratitude evident on his face. You opened my eyes, Doña Rosa. Both of you did. In the months that followed, Santiago's transformation became undeniable. He sold his sprawling mansion, opting for a simpler home closer to the communities he now served. His name, once synonymous with privilege and excess, became a symbol of redemption and hope. Camilla, though still guarded, found herself softening. One evening, as they walked through the neighborhood, she turned to him. "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but maybe you're not so bad after all." Santiago chuckled. "High praise coming from you. Don't let it go to your head," she teased. But there was a hint of a smile on her lips. As for Rosa, she continued to teach Santiago the lessons he needed most. "True wealth, mijo, isn't in the money you have," she told him one day as they tended to her small garden. "It's in the lives you touch, the kindness you show. That's the only legacy worth leaving." Santiago nodded, her words sinking deep into his heart. He had started this journey out of boredom and curiosity, but it had become so much more. It was no longer about testing others' kindness, it was about discovering his own humanity. And in the quiet moments, as he sat on Rosa's porch, watching the sunset with her and Camilla, Santiago realized he had found something he never expected: a sense of purpose and a family that accepted him not for his wealth, but for the man he was striving to become. Don't miss our next videos. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notifications button. What did this story seem like to you? Leave your comment.